Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Irreplaceable Choice. And as you know, with Irreplaceable Choice, we're looking for those individuals, those special people that have become irreplaceable within their spaces, but have learned so many lessons during their lifetimes that they become resilient. And I like to use the term anti-fragile. So when you're resilient, you just bounce back to where you were before. But if you're anti-fragile, you tend not to break. And I think Amanda Voase, who's our guest today, is probably one of those special people that are anti-fragile. She just carries on going regardless. And I truly hope that you get some inspirational messaging, some great tips and tricks, and some good sayings. And there are certain terminologies in that you may or may not recognize, depending on where you're coming from. But there's some really good golden nuggets that Amanda will share. So Amanda, welcome to our episode today for Irreplaceable Choice. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. There's not many places you get to my age and you've done some of the things I've done. There's some places you don't get invited anymore.
Yeah, that I suppose that depends on how much damage you've done in
Yes.
between. So
Collateral damage, I think they call it.
tell us a little bit about, because we've got a wonderful book you will be publishing at some stage soon in the next few months. I know you're in that editing phase right now. I've read a big chunk of it, could not put it down. The only reason why I couldn't finish it was literally I had just too many other things on my plate to get to, but I will be finishing it. And it just literally one sentence after the next, it just sort of takes you into the next paragraph. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to re-look at that, because the amount of stories, unbelievable. I mean, but we want to leave that one side. So we're going to leave as a cliffhanger as something to come. So please watch this space.
Just
for
remember,
Amanda's
the
book.
cliffhanger you're talking about, I've actually lived it. So, yeah, my fingernails hurt from holding on.
Yeah, and it's almost as if it's an unreal story, and you did start as an entrepreneur way early in your career. So give us a few minutes just of what that journey was like, and I want to focus on that special characteristic that I see in your life journey, as well as in the way you approach your companies and that. And right now I want to go into that waste management area where you talk about helping the country areas within Gambia in Africa. You're helping some people get to achieve at least drinking water and so on. There's some really good stories around that, but let's talk in general. I mean, who is Amanda, and how did this whole thing come about?
Okay, so I started my first business. I didn't have a choice. A lot of the time, or maybe I did, I just didn't choose anything different. I chose this path. So I was bullied at school. I was sitting what was called O-levels then. I was sitting 10 O-levels. I really wanted to be a barrister. I love the written word, which is maybe why I've penned a book. And I like finding nuances in text and solutions in that. I was bullied at school, so it was untenable for me to stay there. So I went home and I couldn't not work. I came from a working class family. We lived in a council house. Our father was a tailor. So I went home, I took my wardrobe of clothes down to the local market, and I was a teenager, so there was children's clothes. And I took them to the local market and I sold them. I took £50. I took the £50 up to London to a wholesaler, and I bought £35. Obviously, I had to get there and back. Took £35 worth of stock. I went to the market and sold it again. Within 6 months, I was taking £1,000 a day, and that's in the 70s, 1975. That was an awful lot of money. My father was earning £60 a week, just to put it in perspective. And there was this 15-year-old snotty-nosed kid taking £1,000 a week. Sometimes
just in context, you could probably buy a home in those days for that.
It was about £7,000. You could have bought a nice little semi-detached house outside of London.
Yeah, so just in context, this was a lot of money for such a young person to be making it.
So this is the thing that's quite bizarre. It was never about the money. It was always about doing better. And I've never competed with anybody else. only with myself. So it was all about selling one more than I sold yesterday, or reaching another outlet that I didn't have today. It was all about extending myself. It was no one gave me that competitive streak, and I didn't have it with others, only with myself. It was other people have had it with me, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it's a negative energy.
Yeah, it tends to pull you down when you're doing comparative, keeping up with the Joneses type of thing.
And you shouldn't be able. You can't compare. I mean, I like to think I'm original, so don't compare. And a friend of mine said to me, the problem is, Amanda, you make it look easy. They don't see me sitting up all night worrying about what I'm going to say or how I'm going to say it or going through all the different scenarios. They just see me walking in the room and looking like I own it. But I might have been up for 2 or 3 days worrying about how I was going to actually walk in the room, what I was going to wear and what I was going to say. So.
Yeah, and so I mean that's one of the core principles is to make it look easy when you're actually doing it. But what do they say when the duck is sitting on the surface of the water, but there's a lot of paddling happening underneath? So you started there, you've gone through multiple changes, and you went through creating quite a strong fashion business. So you were selling a whole lot of high-end
well, I couldn't buy what I wanted to go in the market. I couldn't buy it for the market stalls. So I opened a shop purely as an address to take the stock in. And then it got to the stage where I was one of the largest children's retailers of Lee Jeans, the American Lee Jeans company, to the point where in the late 70s, they were bringing out corduroys, and they actually phoned up this 19-year-old kid to ask me what colours I wanted them to produce in needle cord or jumbo cord. I mean, and that's when I realised, wow, I'm obviously doing well,
Yeah, being asked advice from people that have been in the industry forever.
That are renowned around, that are global names, that have got their adverts cost more than I could earn in a year. One advert for Lee Jeans costs more what I would like to take in the next 12 months. And there they are calling me for my advice.
So you built that up. I mean, eventually you even employed your parents, I think, as well, and so on. And you had a factory.
My sister.
And your sister. So it just literally, you started with your brother, and I think you became almost the driving force, the spirit of change within your family. But I want to get to the point where we start talking about sort of the coming of age. So you did that because you didn't know any better, if you like. But if you came of age, then you got to a point where now all this stuff started becoming very real. But you also have met so many famous people in your life too, and just the stories of them. I mean, I really want to encourage people to read your book. But if I go into sort of that coming of age, sort of, if we come back to that theme of irreplaceable, because no matter what's happened to you, you shot up in terms of your ability to, just the natural ability to do business and to grow a company.
I do think it's a gift. Nobody taught me what to do, and I've had some great mentors over the years. But I think it's a gift. It's a bit like when I was designing my clothing range. Nobody taught me how to, I left school at 14. I had no formal education. And no one taught me how to put an Excel spreadsheet together, but I do one now that goes from assumptions all the way through to P&L on a balance sheet. It's just, I'm self-taught with everything, which means there's lots of mistakes made. If you can get the education, anyone out there, take it. Unfortunately, I couldn't. So I had to teach myself, and I learned nothing from my successes, but I learned an awful lot from my failures.
Yeah, and I think that's probably core to the message. So the idea is that nothing should hold you back, regardless of where you come from, what your potential is right now, and what you think of are the roadblocks or these obstacles in your way.
Don't think. You see, the fact is, no matter who you are and what you're doing in life, there's always a good reason not to do something. So don't focus on that. Don't focus on the reasons not to do it. Focus on the outcome. Look at what the end result is and then work out how to get there. Don't look at why you shouldn't start on the journey.
It's almost easier said than done, but it's almost like something you got to go through yourself to overcome that fear. And the best way to do it is just to get going, to get. I love that thing. Don't think.
The other thing is, and I said this, and a fellow entrepreneur who read the book twice, actually, who managed a large pension fund in the UK, he commented on it. And one of the things I said is a lot of entrepreneurs never felt good enough, be it from their parents or their school or their friends. You always felt a bit of the odd one out. So you immersed yourself in something else where you had the comfort factor. And I think that's very true of myself. I never really fitted in anywhere very well. I got on well everywhere, but getting on with people and fitting in with them are two very different things. So I had to make my own way in life. And I know at the beginning you said I wasn't fragile. Doesn't mean I haven't been broken a few times, and doesn't mean you're not vulnerable. It just means it's not how low you go, it's how high you bounce back. And staying on the floor is not an option.
Yeah, because you actually got no choice. It's like, what else can you do?
Well, I don't know. Listen, the fact of how many antidepressants are issued nowadays shows you that there are alternatives. I just never went that route. Because that wasn't an option for me, because that would have meant that I grew up with a mother that never thought I was good enough. And by me staying on the floor, I'd have proved her right. And maybe that's the driving force. Maybe that's the one. I'm going to show you that I am good enough. I'm more than good enough.
Yeah, and it's that adversity or the pressure or even a psychological impact often from others, not necessarily, or circumstance.
It is from others and circumstances that shapes us. Our past does define our future, fortunately or unfortunately, and sometimes it works out for the best and sometimes it's a mitigated disaster. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't embrace the future. There's thousands of people that didn't wake up today. So right away, we've got our own little miracle. We're ahead of many people. So just embrace the day.
Embrace the day and do what you can. So let's just go through it. So you created this outlet for fashion and for clothing, etc., especially the children's clothing, etc. And you got this massive outlet, and then you started getting involved in the Middle East, and you also from there you started expanding your horizons. So you also got into this waste management side of things, and I think just touch on that if you can.
So I was involved in many industries over the years. I grew up, when you're wealthy, you tend to mix with a certain crowd, which I was doing by then. You're earning thousands of pounds a week. I was at Tramp nightclub every night, Morton's in Berkeley Square, swanning around in a Rolls Royce and a fur coat, and I was mixing with the rich and famous. I was still popping into the council house, but the thing that is important, I never changed. I was the same. My conversation matter changed. So if I'm sitting in a palace or I'm in a council house, Amanda was the same Amanda. You couldn't put a cigarette paper between the two. The only thing that was different was my conversation. So never change who you are. Never sell yourself out, because you fake it till you make it. I disagree with that. You should never fake it, because we can always smell a fake from a mile off. So if you can't be you, get out and go where you can be you.
Yeah, be real, be authentic.
Yeah,
and I think there was a time when everything was too polished, everything was too made up.
I've never been that girl. I've never been too polished. My nails have been, but not me. Rude, crude, and socially unacceptable is my phrase.
Just for the benefit of the audience, because I've got to know you by reading your book and having conversations with you before, but let's just name some of your accomplishments, just so that we can get people that don't know you, get that sense of who you are and what you've accomplished.
Well, I'm still alive. That's got to be my biggest accomplishment, considering where I've been and some of the things I've done. I think that my biggest accomplishment was being happy and content. I think that should be everyone's aim. And I've had millions and I've been homeless, and I was really unhappy when I was homeless, but I was also equally as unhappy when I had millions. So it isn't about the money. And it's never about where you are. It's who you're with always. It's always, sometimes the journey is just as, is more fun than arriving than the end, you know. So my accomplishments, well, I conquered the children's clothing world, I guess. There was really expensive or really cheap, and I came in the middle. I worked with a media mogul from Australia who was like my second father, who I still miss. I miss him and my father. And he was amazing. I loved him to bits. And I was involved with hotels and casinos for many years. My ex-husband was actually involved in casinos. He's a director de jure of the Palm Beach in Cannes, first Englishman ever. So I flew out to Cairo to open a factory out there to supply the Middle East. I got so drunk that I stood up and entered a belly dancing competition and beat all the local Egyptian women, and ended up having dinner with Mohammed Mubarak because I won this because an English woman won the belly dancing competition. I lived in Qatar back in the 80s when it was a dry state, and my partner then was one of the Al-Thanis. That went down, and I'm from a Jewish family. That went down like the Titanic, but there you go. I guess I've never looked at where it's, again, like I said, I don't think. So I've never looked at what could happen. I just looked at, or what couldn't happen. I've always looked at, this feels great, so I'm going to do it. I'm not saying that everyone should do that, because it doesn't always work out right for me. So I was involved in a plethora of industries. I was involved in telecoms, property. I lived in Spain for 7 years. I had a real estate office in Spain. I called it Centurion Estates because I bought it with my Centurion card. And I came back to the UK. I put 4 children through private school. My husband didn't earn any money, so I've supported him, and he had a gambling habit. So it wasn't, I'm laughing and joking, but I've got to tell you there was some very sad days from, don't feel sorry for me because I brought it on myself. I shouldn't let him have the combination to the safe, should I? And then he couldn't have gambled my money. But anyway, I put 4 children through private school. We moved to Spain for 7 years. I started an internet company. I lost 8.5 million, and I didn't have that much. So that really hurt. The dot-com bubble, I floated just before lastminute.com and boo.com. So that was a disaster. So I've had just as many disasters. In fact, the disasters outweigh the successes because I didn't make as much money in my successes to cover the disasters. Anyway, I got introduced to the waste to energy business in March 2008. I was asked to bring funding for somebody because I've got lots of contacts in the business world. And I looked at their business plan and I just thought, oh my God, I want to be in this business. And actually, in all the businesses and industries I've been in over the years, I've been in this one the longest. And I don't get bored. I'm obsessed with it. It possesses me morning, noon and night. I finished at 2:00 this morning on the phone to Australia. I'm working with countries across Africa. I'm now working with the Panamanian government because there isn't a country in the world that hasn't got a problem with waste. And when you go to developing countries that haven't got the money for clean drinking water, they certainly as hell haven't got the money to collect and recycle the waste. So I don't agree with, I think climate is changing in spite of who's on the earth, not because of who's on it. But the fact there's more microplastic in the ocean than stars in the sky, we are absolutely polluting our planet. We're digesting plastic every time we eat fish. And that's what we need to address. We need to clean up our planet. And it's no good cleaning up the ocean. You need to stop it in the river and the street, but before it gets to the ocean. So, I got banned from LinkedIn for saying all of that because it went against the narrative. But I do think our planet's polluted, and I do think we need to clean it up. And and all this putting it in different bags doesn't make any difference because it all goes to the same place. It's actually about the collection, the recycling centre, and converting it into a commodity that pays for the waste So you don't have to dispose of plastic. Just pick it. You don't have to ban it or cancel it out. But because you give me 250,000 tons of plastic, I'll give you 1.2 million barrels of biofuel. And if you want jet fuel, so it'll be 600 million barrels of jet fuel. Don't get rid of the plastic. Don't stop using it, because no one's going to stop using it anyway. It's in everything, be it when you open your fridge and what surrounds your fridge, or your telephone, or or a packet of cigarettes or a packet of sweets. It's all around us. Your shampoo bottle, everything. So it's actually about converting the waste into a commodity that we can sell for the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I love what you said about the rivers. We got to stop, because when it rains, it washes all the rubbish that has not been collected into the rivers. The rivers run down into the sea. So if you just pick it up at the source, or don't throw it away onto the streets and whatever, pick that up, make it easy for people to collect. And then all of a sudden you don't have as much waste in the sea, and then it becomes less of a problem.
But actually the microplastic in the sea is mostly from tires. And this is one of the reasons I got banned from LinkedIn, because the electric cars are so much heavier. So the residue that's coming from the tires that's going into our oceans from electric cars is even higher than it was before. So you think, there was a lot of microplastic before. It ain't nothing to what's coming. And of course, we're pillaging the planet to get the cobalt out and to make the batteries. And so I produce waste. I produce energy from waste. So we take the waste, we put it in a high temperature gasification, which is completely closed, a closed unit. There's zero emissions. And we convert it into what's called a synthetic gas. Okay, at high temperature. That's how you separate the molecules, without getting too technical on this and boring everyone to sleep. There's zero emissions from that process. But where the emissions do come in is where you convert the synthetic gas to electricity. And that's where the emissions come in. So people talk about clean electricity. There's no such thing, I'm afraid. There's cleaner electricity, but there's no such thing as clean. When you create a solar panel or a windmill, a wind turbine, you are using oil to produce those items. And no one's talked about where they're going to dispose of them when they're done for. And only a third of the value of the solar park or the wind farm is actually transmitted to the grid. So you've got a 100 megawatt facility. You're lucky if you get 32% goes into the grid. Whereas you give me 1,000 tons of waste, I will give you 1,000 megawatts of electricity into the grid, or diesel or jet fuel.
Yeah, and I think this just is a really good example of someone that's come from no education as a youngster, thrown into or you threw yourself into it, let's put it that way, without knowing, got into the business world, learned all these things yourself. And now when I listen to you and you talk about the generation of electricity and waste management, as if you're an expert, and you are an expert because you've literally put the work in. You didn't sit back and say, my life's over, or this is not going to work. Or when you had, I think when the .com went wrong, and you didn't give up. You just said, I'm going to find the next thing. In 2008, you started this. And from what I understand is, you knew nothing about this to start with. And you went all over the place and you just asked the questions.
My chief engineer, he lives in the US, Keith. Big shout to Keith. He's forgotten more than I'll ever know. And he used to talk to me like I was a 10-year-old, and he educated me totally in this industry. And I've been blessed with some, I've got a team around me of experts, and I count my blessings every day that they're supporting me. I haven't paid any of them yet, of the lots of promises, but they've stayed on this journey with me for years because they have faith in me. And that gives you the confidence to move on as well.
Yeah. So what's next for you is to turn this into full revenue generating, but not only that, but to start getting the personal reward, as in you've managed to overcome a lot of the big problems people have in the world as well.
One of the biggest problems, Dudley, sorry to talk across you, is for the first 8 or 10 years that I was doing this business, I was having to educate everyone. When I got into this industry in 2008, no one had really heard of renewable energy. It was solar panels on your roof. There was, the climate change had started obviously years ago, but no one was buying into if I pay more tax, it'll help climate change. Like, seriously? No, it said nobody ever. But the waste in the streets, piling up in the streets, and the rivers and the seas, and the plastic in your food chain, that started to filter through to the general public. So then my job became a lot easier. And now I've got countries, and I deal with presidents and prime ministers. I deal at governmental level. And now they're approaching me. I'm now talking to, Panama's got a really serious problem. And I want to help them, because it isn't just about cleaning up the country. It's about creating employment and giving the youth of today, what chance have they got, especially now with AI and all this, all robotic systems. Where's the future for our children and our children's children? Well, you know what? It's in new industry. It's in exactly this sort of thing. So in Africa, we've got a facility in Ghana that we're JVing with, and we don't use machines to separate the waste there. We use people, because instead of using 3 machines and half a dozen people, we're giving 60 people employment. And isn't that better? And you're creating a community then. You've got a community at work. They go home together, they live together, they eat together, and they can afford to eat. That's even more important.
Yeah, so it's creating opportunity to uplift those that are unable to uplift themselves, and at least getting a part of the problem solved.
Look, the reason most of us don't succeed is because we're not given the opportunity. So if you open the opportunity door, and let's see who comes through it, and from that, the other thing that I want to do, especially in Africa, because it's the richest continent in the world. It is not right that it's also the poorest continent in the world. The two don't equate. There's got to be a balance of scales. Otherwise, our world is really skewed, which we know it is at the moment. But anyway, so yeah, it's all about. I'll take the skilled ones, the ones that shine. I'll take them to the West and give them an education, and they'll get the degrees. I'm not doing this in Africa for me. I'm doing this in Africa for Africans. And the same in Panama. It's for the local people. It's not for Amanda and the government and the president, who's not going to be president in 4 years' time. It's for the people and their children and their children's children. It's about leaving a legacy.
That's very true, because if I take Ghana, Nigeria, and I take the West Africa, I think from statistical, and I don't know how true this is, but apparently the population there will be bigger than the Chinese population by the end of the century. It'll be more people in West Africa, that space there.
And that's okay, because as long as the West stops stealing it, they've got the natural resources and the minerals to look after that population. As long as they're their own worst enemy as well. Sometimes, let's not say that they haven't stolen from their own, but let's show them how it's done. Don't stop using oil and gas. Just burn it differently. Use it cleaner. That's all. It grows in the earth. It replenishes itself. It is from Mother Nature. It's how we use it, how we extract it from the earth, and how we convert it into things that needs to change. Not that what we're using. If you like eggs and they're not good for you, well, don't have them fried. Have them scrambled. Guess what? It won't hurt so much. Still eggs, though.
It's true. So, I mean, isn't it just the maturity of certain regions and certain peoples? So you have people going, if you look at in the West, they've potentially been on a particular journey for or a different trajectory than maybe some of the African states. And because of the colonization, etc., all of that, there could be a whole myriad of reasons. But in general, across the world, and I'm talking about everywhere across the world, there's the human condition. Everyone suffers from that. And there's obviously greed. There's all kinds of things like that. And you must have seen a fair share in your lifetime of these pitfalls. People fall into traps of just overdoing things.
Well, unfortunately, the worst killer of anything of all is greed. See, ambition is healthy. Greed is a killer. And greed is selfish. Ambition, you tend to bring people with you when you're ambitious. But when you're greed, it's every man out for himself. And that's where everything falls down.
So if we then just sort of, because I'm going to again encourage, we'll as soon as you get your book published, I want to get you onto another episode, and then we can chat about more about the life story.
Random House, they're working on it now.
Yeah, so they're working on it now. So I don't want to give too much away in your life story, but I do want to just for the benefit of our community, of the Irreplaceable Choice community, and I still think you're anti-fragile. In other words, you have these moments where you have these setbacks, but you always bounce back.
Maybe we're not anti-fragile because I have broken a few times. Maybe we're just made of rubber where we bounce. Maybe it's not anti-fragile because I have cried. I've been suicidal in my life. The opening chapter of my book is me sitting in front of a therapist because I didn't want to go on anymore. I didn't think I was capable of going on anymore. Obviously I was, because that was 20 years ago. So fragile, no, I am fragile and vulnerable, yeah, and it hurts. And if I spoke about it now, I would probably end up crying. So define fragile and breakable. I have been broken, but I've stuck myself back together again because nobody's ever given me anything in my life, Dudley. And why should it start change now? I'm 63, I'm 64 this year. So I've got more behind me than in front of me, and I don't expect anyone to give me anything now. I've had people give me a helping hand, but nobody's gone, there you go, that's yours. That's what I want to do in Africa. I don't want to give them charity. I want to give them an entity where they're financially and emotionally invested, where if they put in the work, they'll get out the benefits.
Would we be able to then define that more as sort of the legacy you want to leave? You want to leave something that you've made an imprint and you've made a difference by the end of this.
Oh God, yeah. It's, I don't want gratitude, but it'd be nice to be appreciated. It's when I go to a village in Africa and only 36% of the population have got electricity and only 18% of them have got clean drinking water. If I can leave, and there's no point in giving them electricity if you don't give them a job so they can pay the bill, right? There's no point in you, but you can buy me a Ferrari tomorrow. I say thank you very much, but I can't afford to run it, insure it, and put the gas in. So guess what? You're better off buying me a new bed, because I'll use that every day. And that's the same with Africa's, But wouldn't it be nice to walk away and they've got electricity and they've got jobs so they can pay their bills and they're not reliant on the West anymore. They make them self-sufficient.
So that's a great message. So let's bring the recording or the podcast to an end now, and maybe just as let's call it a cliffhanger, maybe just something to look forward to, the release of your book, and also sort of a bit of a takeaway, just as in,
and a film. Apparently they're talking about doing a film.
And a film. I meant to say that as well, because I think it reads like a movie.
Yeah, it's certainly episodial.
Yes.
Yes.
And even the chapters in the book, the way that you've broken it up, the chapters up.
Well, that's how I lived them. They came in chronological order, actually.
They would. What sort of final sort of message for today would you share with our community? What do you think they should take away from this short discussion that we've had?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, if you don't believe in yourself, comes back to what we were saying about investing in yourself. People say to me, what have you put in? I went bankrupt keeping this business on the road. I lost everything. I lost a 4-bedroom home in Chelsea. I lost a Range Rover. I was selling my designer clothing, designer bags, just to keep food on the table and to keep the show on the road, keep the lights on. Never give up. If you don't believe in you, how on earth can you go to knock on a stranger's door and ask them to believe in you? Keep the faith and never give up. Persistence beats resistance.
I love that. Amanda Voase, thank you very much for joining us today. I really do appreciate you.
And remember, this, no matter what happens today, the sun will still come up tomorrow. So nothing's life-changing.
It may be a dark moment now, but like you said, the sun will always come up. So thank you very much. I do appreciate your time, your energy. I know you're busy. I know you got, I mean, I caught you in between calls as well to record the episode. Thank you. You're always a shining light for me whenever I chat to you, and I always feel like nothing's inconquerable. You just have to get on with it and stop making excuses.
Listen, all mountains have been scaled. You just got to find which face to climb. That's all. Make sure you've got the right boots on.
Yeah, and someone's done it before as well. It's not like you're new to it.
Even if they haven't, you don't have. But the other thing is, I said when I first started this business, you don't have to be first. You just have to be better. And the proof of that was MySpace and Facebook. MySpace was first. Facebook did it better. So you don't have to be first. You just got to be right.
Yeah, and you also have to have the persistence to carry on regardless of what's happening.
Yeah, and never give up. As they say in Galaxy Quest, never give up, never surrender.
I love it. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today, Amanda. Much appreciate that. And to our audience, thank you very much. If you do want to get hold of Amanda, how do people get hold of you?
Well, I'm not on any social media. I suppose I should change that. You can get hold of me through my Savry's website. So, by the way, Savry stands for Sustainable and Viable Renewable Energy Solutions. And the viable means financially viable, because if it's not financially viable, it's not sustainable. So savrys.com, there's info@or amanda@savrys.com. And if anyone needs any help, don't ask me for money because I haven't got any myself. But if you need any help, I'm more than happy to mentor and assist with my extensive knowledge of what not to do. I might not be able to tell you how to do it, but I can definitely tell you what not to do.
And that's Savres, it's SAVRES.
Yes.
.com. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And thank you for joining us at the Irreplaceable Choice. Amanda's a great example of what to do, maybe also what not to do.
Yeah,
or just to throw yourself in. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you. God bless.